constantly trying to just get into everything, put everything in his mouth, just trying to hurt himself, basically.
It's just good pattern.
Hello. Hello and welcome to the City of Cedar Falls Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for Wednesday, January 28th, 2026. I will call the meeting to order. Can we get a roll call, please?
Alberhaski?
Here.
Grebovich?
Here.
Hartley?
Here.
Henderson?
Here.
Johnson?
Here.
Mosier?
Here.
Stallnaker?
Here.
Watkins?
Here.
Full house tonight.
Thank you. First order of business on our agenda here is approval of minutes from last meeting. Do we have any revisions or changes anyone needs to see? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to approve.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We'll file those away. Next on the agenda is time for public comment. If anyone would like to speak to something that is not otherwise covered later on in the agenda, now's the chance. I'm seeing none. We will jump into, doesn't look like we have old business, so new business is next up, and I believe Michelle has the final plat of North Cedar Estates.
Correct, thank you. The North Cedar Estates final plat is located north of Lone Tree Road and west of Center Street. It also continues Hiawatha Road and Pocahontas Road. And looking at the final plat, it is similar to a checklist of looking at the preliminary plat and how it compares to the final plat, what has changed, and what improvements need to still be done. For a summary of the plat, the parcel in the R2 district is 14.4 acres. There's a park in the A1 zoning district. They're proposing 33 lots. And they're also proposing 5 tracks for the roads and stormwater maintenance areas. And an outlet for the park. Staff has found that the final plat is consistent with the preliminary plat. Prior to the final plat, they are working with engineering to bond for any incomplete improvements. This is including but not limited to the sidewalks along this park and stormwater management areas, grading and seeding for the parkland. And with that, staff recommends approval for the final plat for North Cedar Estates, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you very much. Do any commissioners have questions for staff? Is the petitioner here and would like to speak to this at all? Not seeing so. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak to this item? Then I'll bring it back to the commission for any discussion or thoughts.
Pretty straightforward.
Seems to be pretty similar to what they've been showing us several other meetings.
I would move to approve as is.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. I believe we need a roll call vote for this.
Alberhaski?
Aye.
Grebovich?
Aye.
Hartley?
Aye.
Henderson?
Aye.
Johnson?
Aye.
Mosier?
Aye.
Stallnaker?
Aye.
Watkins?
Aye.
Okay, that will move on to council.
Thank you very much. Next on our agenda is a site plan review for 7 Brew Coffee. Michelle, do you have this too?
I do, thank you. 7 Brew Coffee is proposed at 6003 University, that is north of Coles, east of A-list of Nails, and west of Verizon Strip Mall. The S1 Shopping Center District allows for a drive-through coffee shop. They are proposing a two-lane drive-through. It will look like 2 buildings, but technically be 1 building with a canopy over both sections, and the canopy also will extend over one of the drive-through lanes. They're proposing a one-way drive-through from south to north. The setbacks will be 10 feet from the north, 5 feet from the east, and 17 feet from the west. The building design is a 19 feet, 1-story building with a round shed roof, and they mentioned already the extended canopy. They're proposing fiber cement board for the siding that will look like brick, and same with the trim. The surrounding properties is the A-list to the west, and they have a round entryway in the front, and the small strip mall, which has Verizon Happy Wines and Spritz. Both of these buildings are single story, as well as similar colors as the proposed coffee shop. The code requires 9 parking spaces, and they're proposing 10 parking spaces, and they're also proposing 24 stacking spaces with required of 20 spaces, stacking spaces. And the landscape, as mentioned in the staff report, they're screening the parking spaces and the stacking spaces with a 5-foot landscaping buffer to the east with decorative grasses. This will need to be added to with a supplementary with bushes, and they're also proposing a mix of trees and bushes to the west. They're proposing an enclosed trash enclosure to the south of the site. The gate will be facing the private road. It will be up to 7 feet tall, and it will be concrete that will look like brick. They also do not need to do anything for storm management, but they are going to collect the storm water and add it to the storm sewer. They are proposing solid blue neon lighting along the canopy and roof, so anything that is blue now will be blue at night, and they're proposing lighting under the canopy as well. They're proposing 3 wall signs on 3 of the elevations. 2 of them will be identical, and each sign will need its own sign permit to be applied for before they put the signs up. And with that, staff recommends approval of the site plan and available for any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for staff at this time?
Did you have any concerns about just additional traffic through that area?
No. The traffic is meant to be a shopping center and connecting the shopping areas with out uses that coordinate with the mall.
Is the petitioner or applicant here and would like to speak to this item at all tonight?
I'm here. I'm Nathan with Cedar Coffee. Do I need to stand up?
If you wouldn't mind, yep, if you can come up to the microphone just so we have it all on the record. Appreciate that. Sometimes if it's just like a hi, we don't worry about the microphone.
Oh, sure.
But.
Either way, well, she did a really great job explaining kind of our concept and the compliance we've done with the city so far. If you guys are familiar with our concept, it's very similar to kind of like a Scooters or a Starbucks. Our focus is cultivating kindness and kind of building a positive experience with the customer. So that would be maybe how we would differ in a little bit. But as far as anything that I would have to add to kind of the presentation, I don't really have anything. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the staff has, though. So,
Okay.
What's the timeline on this?
Obviously, after permitting, we do modular buildings, so roughly from the time we break ground, it's kind of a 3 to 4 month timeline. So,
Okay.
depends on weather conditions, though. So,
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
thanks.
Would anyone from the public like to speak to this item at all? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to commission for any comments or consideration.
I think it's a great use of the space, and I would make a motion to approve.
I'll second that.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah, I do. It's nice to see new development on University.
Do appreciate
Excited
infill. That's
Yeah,
great.
excited to see that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Alberhesky,
Aye.
Hartley,
Aye.
Henderson,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Moser,
Aye.
Stallnaker,
Aye.
Watkins.
Aye.
Okay, that, I did.
okay.
Or did I skip you? Gribovich. Sorry.
All right, that will pass. Next on the agenda, we have what I'm assuming most people are here for tonight, is a special presentation on the public review draft of the new College Hill Zoning Code note. Nope, probably the note was not important in part of that, but for us to note that there will be an open house in the council chambers foyer right outside these doors following the meeting. And before we even kick that off, for my clarification, maybe others are wondering too, could you outline there are further steps past to this meeting and public open house before anything would be adopted? Would you be able to just outline what future conversations could be about it?
Yeah, and I'd happy to bring it back to the next Planning and Zoning Commission as well. This is kind of the first step. Leslie Overholzer is here, our code consultant from Codometrics. She gave a presentation to council, I believe last February, was it? Or March, maybe, on a directions report to council. This is all based on the vision plan, and council gave the go-ahead to go forward with drafting new code language for College Hill. So Leslie's here tonight to give a presentation of that public review draft, and there'll be about a month worth of public review time. We're going to set up another public open house in a couple weeks, set up some meetings with some of the stakeholders in the neighborhood that have been involved from the very beginning. The vision plan, and anybody else that wants to come to the public open house, of course, is welcome. And after that public review period, we'll take in comments, and then we'll make some revisions to the code, and then Leslie will prepare the formal public review draft for the commission, and there'll be formal hearings then in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommended draft will be then forwarded on to the City Council, where there'll be more public hearings and before there's a final vote on the code. So it is a fairly long process and lots of opportunities for public input along the way. So I think final adoption probably won't be until later this summer if all goes as planned.
Thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for. Appreciate that. Okay.
With that, Leslie, yeah.
Well, good evening. I'm very excited to be here. I have a relatively long presentation, so I'm going to sort of run through some of the slides at the beginning very quickly that focus on the vision plan and your current zoning, but I'm happy to go back and look at those again as needed. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our project scope, what current zoning in place in the area is right now, and then I'm going to walk you through sort of the structure of the draft and a couple of the details that I think you might be interested in, and then we'll have some time for questions. So our project scope was to, kind of on the heels of the vision plan that was adopted in 2021, was to confirm the validity of that plan, make sure that it was still good for the neighborhood and that people were still confident in all of the goals and objectives of that plan. Based on that validation, our goal is to write zoning that will help to implement the vision plan. I want to say that the current overlay, the College Hill neighborhood overlay, is a very valuable document. It was applied, I think, sort of as a Band-Aid to your current zoning, and one of the things that we wanted to do at the beginning of this process was to evaluate that overlay and kind of simplify its implementation process. The code, the vision plan also creates a whole series of character areas, and specifically some of those character areas are meant to change. The vision plan is meant to sort of enhance those areas, but on the other hand, the neighborhood areas are meant to be sort of stabilized. So you'll see that we've really attempted to do this with the zoning recommendations, but the code, the vision plan actually specifically asked us to write new zoning that would be very specific to this area. So you'll see how we've created a series of transitions between the university and the neighborhood, how we've really tried to kind of right-size the development that could happen in these locations, and be very specific about how new development can infill into the existing area. And of course, we're meant to look at parking, as we're always meant to do in these kinds of locations, and I'll talk quite a bit about that. So our process, as Karen just sort of lined out, is we have 4 phases. Our first phase was initial review and analysis, which just meant to give me an opportunity to really understand the area, to review the vision plan, to review all of your existing zoning that you have in place, but also to meet with people that have a stake in the area, a specific stake in the area. So back when we kicked off the project, we held a series of listening sessions over the course of a couple of days where we met with neighborhood residents, a couple of groups of neighborhood residents, property owners and landlords. We met with the College Hill Partnership, and we had a separate meeting with other business owners that aren't a part of the College Hill Partnership. We met with UNI, we met with some students from the student government, we met with several developers and architects, and also the Bike and Ped Commission. Then we kind of went away after we gathered all of this information and worked really closely with staff over the majority of the last year, drafting those zoning regulations. This initial draft, we created actually several drafts that staff then reviewed and kind of pushed back and forth to where we are right now, which is this phase is called refining the code, and it is the public review draft. This is sort of our best foot forward. There's still a couple of things that we know we need to tweak, but we're putting it out there with the hope that you all and all of the stakeholders and anybody that's interested will give us some comments, and then we can kind of work through it. We are, as Karen just mentioned, holding some meetings, some specific meetings with stakeholders on February 12th. I think we're going to have a work session with you all on February 11th, the evening before, and then we will hold another open house on February 12th in the late afternoon as well. So this is where we are right now, and then Karen just defined phase 4, which is the sort of more formal approval process. Once we get to that formal approval process, we really hope that we've kind of worked out any issues or questions that we have with the draft code. We hope to have a good solid draft to bring before you for that formal process. So I'm just going to take a few minutes to look at the vision plan to remind everybody what's in it. There's a set of summary. There are quite a few little bullet lists. There's the big ideas. There's the recommendations. This is a set of summary recommendations that I think helps us to implement the vision plan as much as possible. So first off, it calls for a very targeted approach, an approach that looks at the market and the developability of all of these sites in the area, as well as the surrounding context and character. And we want to make sure that we're kind of marrying those two and making sure that we're creating a code that will not only implement the vision, but will work within the context of the area as well. The vision plan also calls very specifically for active building facades and sidewalks, and the idea of this sort of streetscape and building facade working together to create more walkable places is very key to the plan and very key to our code as well. In addition to walkability, making sure that we're creating a multimodal environment, that we're supporting bikes as well, and that cars have a place to park. We're also looking at creating gateways to the area and looking at all of those public spaces and making sure that we're creating more a sort of series of smaller public spaces, places for people to gather, places for landscape and trees to occur. And then finally, we really want to look at the sort of rules for development and making sure that we're creating a very streamlined process, an easy way for people to do the right thing in the right places within the College Hill neighborhood. And that includes really looking at the parking supply and making sure that we're requiring the appropriate amount of parking in order to trigger development and to park the cars. So the vision plan also outlines a series of character areas, and this is a map pulled directly from the vision plan. We're focused in on really on areas 1, 2, 3, and 4. So area 1 is the College Street corridor, along with it kind of L's onto 23rd, and so that is the kind of storefront shopping Main Street area of College Hill. Area 2 is sort of the general College Hill area, and combined with area 3, which they're they call the university neighborhood. Those two areas are really meant to be student housing, student offices, those kind of support areas. And then area 4 is the neighborhood, the residential neighborhood with houses and 1 and 2 unit houses. These are the areas, so this kind of outline, white outline that we've overlaid on top of it are the areas that we're addressing with the new zoning code. And I'll show you this again. So for each one of those areas, the vision plan created a whole series of standards that we were able to build off of in the code. So it talked about maximum building heights, how much glass and transparency the buildings all needed. It looked at building materials, but probably most importantly is it gave us this whole series of images that we could look at that are meant to kind of convey the intent that the community was looking for within each one of these character areas. And so we really relied on those images and the sort of descriptions for each one of those character areas in order to create the code. So these are character areas 1 and 2. So the image on the left side is the storefront frontages along College Street. The general College Hill frontages are those areas for the student housing right closer to the neighborhood, closer to the university and kind of on either side of the hill of College Street. And then university neighborhood frontages as a kind of a buffer between those areas and the neighborhood, and then the traditional neighborhood houses. So those 4 pages that I just showed you are pulled directly from the vision plan. So the current zoning in the area, I'll just say the base zoning is pretty inappropriate for the College Hill area. I mean the Hill area. The C3 is an inappropriate base zone for that area. It allows for things like lumber yards, and it allows a ridiculous amount of height in that area. That, of course, is superseded by the overlay. So the overlay was kind of a Band-Aid on top of that base zoning to help fix that and to make sure that the value of those Main Street buildings was retained. Then the R3 and R4 are the multiple family residential districts that occupy those kind of multifamily student housing areas on either side of College Street. And then the R2 is the neighborhood, and then R1 is the neighborhood sort of a little bit to the north that's feeling some pressure and getting some new development in there, which is why it was added in to our zoning area, a portion of Area 7. And then the blue areas that you see on this map, this is the city's current zoning map, are the areas where the College Hill neighborhood overlay applies. So as I just said, the height and the inappropriate uses in the C3 zone don't really work for that area. Within the R3 and R4 areas, those zoning districts require lot sizes that don't apply to the current area. There are a lot of lots that are smaller, and so some of those lots have perhaps not redeveloped because they are non-conforming right now, and so it's difficult for them to do anything on them that could replace what currently exists. The height within these areas is generally up to 3 stories, and there are really no building design standards within the current zoning districts, but however, the overlay does apply new design standards to that, or design standards to those areas. And it's sort of similar in the R1 and R2 zones. Those are much more accurate for what's on the ground, but there are quite a few smaller lots that are non-conforming in the R2 location. There also are no standards for garage location, even though you can see from these images, especially in the R2 area, that these are traditional houses where the garages don't sort of dominate the fronts of the houses. In fact, most of the garages are in the rear. And some of the new development you can see in those bottom 2 images are new duplex units that have 2 garages on the fronts and really sort of dominate the buildings. It's very different from the current character of the area, and so we've addressed that in the new code. The R1 and R2 explicitly prohibit conversion of single unit to 2 unit. That's in your code in a couple of different places, and we have retained that in the new draft as well. So the College Hill Neighborhood Overlay is a really great document, has a lot of really good information within it. It's approximately 21 pages that looks like the page that you see in front of you. It doesn't have any graphics or illustrations. It also includes lots of sort of discretionary standards that are very hard for staff to implement. They're also very hard for developers to follow. So when everybody's not on the same page in terms of what is expected, it becomes very hard to actually implement. It takes a lot of time. And so the use of should statements is usually avoided in any code that I aim to draft. We try to create very objective standards, and if we're using shall, then it is associated with a very objective standard. What we have found is that that just results in a much more predictable outcome, and that everybody's kind of all on the same page and doesn't have this sort of difficulty getting on the same page from the standards. However, there are lots of good pieces within the overlay, and we have used that as a basis for drafting a lot of the regulations as we move forward, and I'll tell you a little bit about those. There are sort of two main issues, though, that we have with the overlay, and one is that sort of idea that we've got these base zoning districts that don't really do anything, and then we're adding another layer of regulations on top of it, which just adds a complexity that's unnecessary. And so you'll see that we've proposed just creating new zoning districts that would replace both of those. And the other thing is that the process for getting anything approved is quite difficult, because the overlay requires pretty much everything to go in front of you all, the PZC, and then get approval from City Council. And so that adds approximately 3 months to any kind of review process. And that means even simple changes to residential properties require that sort of process. And so we'd like to simplify that so that if somebody is doing the thing that we hope that they will do, that we're making it easier and simpler for them to get approvals. We also have enforcement issues because of the interpretation of those discretionary items. And then again, as I stated, the unpredictable approval process can be a barrier to getting the kinds of development that we hope to see happen. I'm going to talk about parking in just a minute, just to know that the current parking standards in the overlay were referred to in this new draft. Okay, so now I'm going to dive into the draft code and try to kind of make it easier for you all to look at some details that you're interested in if I kind of give you the sort of overview. So if you look at the table of contents, that tells you quite a bit about this draft. The first chunk of sections, and by the way, this is numbered with its own new set of numbers, so it will just sort of tack on to the current code. So the 26-200 is a set of currently unused numbers. The first 3 sections of the code are really addressing building envelope and the street facade. So it is all about, you know, what are your setbacks? Where is your building siding? Where's your parking siding? How does that building facade relate to the street? All of the facade standards. So you'll see that we have 26-202 is about building types, and then the next is about base types. And so we're using building types to organize this, and I'll explain that in just a minute. We're also using base types, which is just that sort of ground floor and how that relates to the street. So that becomes very important, for example, with storefronts or with porches as a transition between an entrance and the sidewalk. The next section you'll see is about building use, and so the 2 sort of main pieces of information in this code are about building type, which again gives you that building form standard, and then how that building is used in the building use section. And then there's a whole series of general development standards that apply to all of the building types. So we have a series of building design standards, roof types, landscape and site design standards. The parking standards and the sign standards apply to all of the building types in all of the districts. Okay, so I sort of told you this already, but we created a whole new set of districts for the College Hill area. when I'm naming these districts, I'm trying to kind of create symbols that can help staff to know exactly what is expected within those zoning districts. So if you're looking at the symbols, then an X typically means mix, whether it's a mix of use or a mix of building forms. S means storefront, G means general, and N means neighborhood. So I've created a new zoning district for the College Street area, which is called Mixed Use Storefront, SX-2, and that will replace the current C3 that is up and down College Street and that little L along 23rd. General residential office mix, which is GX3, general being the sort of building form that we're expecting, and I'll show you that in a minute. And it's a little bit of a mix of uses and very much a mix of building forms. And that's sort of that university neighborhood area, and I'll show you that in just a minute. Neighborhood residential mix, which is only residential, and it is a multi-use residential, which is meant to be a buffer between the neighborhood and that kind of heavier SX and GX, the mixed-use storefront and the general residential. And then the N1 and N2, which will replace the R1 and R2 exactly. And then we've also introduced an OS, an open space zone, just so that when you're looking at the zoning map, you can see where the parks are, and they sort of show up. So this is the proposed zoning map, and so as you can see that the purple through the middle is the current commercial Main Street area with the SX mixed-use storefront zone. All of the darker blue is the most intense residential, multi-unit residential and office and service uses around those. The orange is the multi-unit residential that's lower in scale than the blue areas, and it's meant to be a transition between those more intense areas in the purple and the dark blue and the neighborhood. And the N2 is located in the current R2 location, and then the N1 is located in the current R1 location. So, now that we have our sort of new map for the area and we've replaced the base zoning districts and we've replaced the overlay, the way that we're regulating building form on this site is through building types. And through the vision plan, as well as what's existing on the ground in these areas, we've kind of combined it and come up with these 5 main building types. So we have a storefront building, which would be used up and down the Main Street area, College Street, with ground floor storefront and upper story residential, built up to the street so that it's walkable, just like what's existing in that area right now. The urban general building, which is a larger, sort of more intense multi-unit residential building, and that would be in those dark blue areas. A row building, which is a lower scale, it's like townhouses or row houses, vertically divided buildings. A multi-unit house, which would be that transition between the neighborhood and those more intense areas. And the multi-unit house allows for multifamily in those areas, but at a smaller scale, more than what's currently allowed, but meant, again, to be that transition between the neighborhood yard houses, which is the last building type, and those more intense urban general buildings, multifamily buildings. So those 5 building types are then arrayed on this table. And this table, along with the use table, are the 2 key pieces of information to understand what's allowed in your zoning district. Just like today, when you look at your zoning district on the map, you look at the uses that are allowed and you look at all the setbacks and height standards that are allowed. It's the same thing with this code. You look at the map and then you look at what building type is allowed and what uses are allowed. And the nice thing about building types is it helps everybody to kind of get get on the same page and understand what the expectation is in that particular area. So instead of just saying, oh, well, these are your setbacks and your heights, we're talking about a row building or a townhouse, or we're talking about a multi-unit house, or we're talking about a storefront building. So as you can see from this table, certain building types are allowed in different districts. So within the College Street district, the SX2, only the storefront building is allowed. That's the only kind of building type really that's there right now, and so we're carrying that forward. So that's your typical mixed-use building with ground floor storefront. In the GX3, those navy blue areas, we're allowing pretty much every building type except for the storefront building, because we really want to push those storefront uses to College Street. And so we want the GX3, the navy blue area, to be those multi-unit buildings, apartment buildings, and maybe offices or services from the university or to support that residential. You're allowed to do townhouses in the row building, or do an apartment building in an urban general building, or do a smaller scale multi-unit house in that area, or even a yard house in that area. Then the orange area surrounding that is a row building or a townhouse building, a multi-unit house, a yard house. Multi-unit houses and yard houses are kind of what's there right now, and a civic building is just a building that's allowed for civic and institutional uses like churches and things like that. But all of those building types would be allowed in that orange area to mix, and all of the standards have been calibrated so that they all work together within that area. Then the yard house is the only type of building type that's allowed in the N1 and N2, much like what is currently there right now, but there's a little bit of other items that I'll show you in just a minute. Each one of those building types in the code has 6 pages associated with it. The 6 pages are laid out all exactly the same. So if you are a developer and you go and you look at the color on your map, and then you go and you see which building types are allowed on that table, then you go to one set of 6 pages to understand basically the envelope your building is allowed to be within. And these 6 pages are, again, all organized the same. They are in a table format so that it's easier to find the information, and then the table information is then keyed to a graphic that explains it. So the first page is a description and intent, and it has images associated with it. This one you're looking at is the storefront, the series of 6 pages for the storefront building. The second page is all about locating the building siting. The third page is about locating your parking and also your outdoor space, which I'll explain in just a minute. The fourth page is about height and roofs. The 5th page is about street facade. So what makes this type of code unique is that we are looking at some standards on the street facade. So we're looking at doors and windows mostly, but also some facade definition. And then the last page is for supplemental regulations. So that is just if there's something in those tables that needs a little bit more explanation, or there's another image that we want to include, we can put that on there. This set of pages also makes it easy for staff to revise, to change a number within the table, or to add an additional piece of information to the supplemental regulations. So it's meant to be modified as needed moving forward. So that's sort of the basic structure to the building form requirements. And now I'm going to just talk a little bit about some of the things that we heard from the community and how we've addressed those within the code. So one of the things that we heard from the community was that they wanted more open space, they wanted more landscape, and they wanted some relief from the buildings that were going to be developed within this area. And so what we've done is when a development is longer than 150 feet long, so if it's a new mixed-use building or a new apartment building, this is mostly going to happen, it's all going to happen in those sort of core areas, the purple and the dark blue on the map. those buildings are required to incorporate either what we're calling a forecourt or a streetscape plaza. And that means a kind of wide space in the streetscape. So if you're walking along that building, if it didn't have this requirement, it would be 150 feet of flat facade, or maybe articulated facade if we've got that, and we do have that in the standards. But it doesn't give you a lot of relief, and it doesn't give you a place to sort of stop and eat your sandwich or stop and have a conversation. And so what we've done is we've created this requirement for forecourts or a streetscape plaza, which is just a wide space. A forecourt is more of a courtyard entrance into the building. And then we have a whole series of standards for how those can be landscaped, and they need to include some seating. They're pretty simple standards. But again, this is an extension of the streetscape design to incorporate more open space along the street. And then also we've incorporated and carried forward this sort of idea of private open area that you currently have in your downtown character district code. We've managed private open area per bedroom because we're talking about a lot of students and a lot of bedrooms, but we're managing it by unit in terms of the number of balconies or private yards, or as common space in the courtyard, or those forecourts can count towards it, or perhaps a rooftop terrace, or a side and rear yard area, or a combination of any of these. So this private open area just simply means that there will be some outdoor space that the residents of the building can utilize. And then additionally, we have a standard in there that requires a minimum amount of streetscape area. I don't know if you've ever seen a location where there's a 4-foot sidewalk along a street because the street's been widened and there's not a lot of pedestrian area left. And then if somebody were to build to right at the edge of that right-of-way line, there wouldn't be very much pedestrian area. So this minimum streetscape area requires that you have at least 12 feet from the back of curb in so that you have enough space for a sidewalk and a street tree to go in. It doesn't actually apply to a lot of areas in the College Hill area, mostly within that dark blue area within the university housing. A second thing that we've heard, especially from the property owners, landlords, and developers, was that in these sort of area 2 and 3, the university housing areas in the vision plan, there's just not a lot of developability on those sites because of those non-conforming lot sizes. And so one of the things that we really wanted to be conscious of is that we weren't just writing a code that would make for buildings that fit within the context, but that we were actually hoping to trigger economic development in these areas, that we were hoping that these sites can be redeveloped. And we certainly heard from UNI that they hoped that especially some of the housing within these, the GX3 and the NX3, the navy blue and the orange areas could redevelop. So that was something that we were very conscious of. So we wanted to give enough space for the number of units, but then at the same time make sure that those units were, those buildings were fitting into the context of the area. And so what we've done is in the GX3, it's kind of no holds barred, and you've seen some development happening in there. We're allowing for 5 stories with that 5th story pushed back, so it will read as a 4-story building from the street, but that most intensive development is in those navy blue areas. So within those transitional areas in the orange, we still want redevelopment to occur. So what we've done is we've allowed for longer buildings to occur within there, but we're requiring them to be divided up into building segments. So we have a 35-foot segment, which is approximately the width of a traditional house, that all those buildings would need to fit within. And that means that in between 2 of those building segments, it needs to push back and give you some relief so that when you're looking down the street, you would only be seeing those front facades that are 35 feet. So you can see that the height is limited, that we have allowed for more developability within the NX3 in terms of building coverage on the lot, but that we've kept the height lower and we've required this sort of division in there. So we believe that we've sort of, turned the knobs on this to get to reach both goals within that area. So lastly, in terms of the yard house, those standards are all based on the existing buildings that are in the area. We have adjusted some of the setbacks to match more of what's actually on the ground there. But we have allowed for a twin yard house. Actually, your current code allows for that. They call it a bi-attached house, but we've defined the standards so that that twin yard house looks more like a house would look in the area, as opposed to sort of two long houses attached, so that you can see some of the images there. And we've also allowed for a yard house court. It would require a very large lot, and there's only one or two in the area that we have found, but a yard house court is different from the cottage court that you've seen developed in the downtown area. It actually has a true courtyard, a 30-foot courtyard with no sidewalk through the middle, a sidewalk kind of around, and then we've limited the height to 1.5 stories, and you can only do 6 units. So we believe it's a much more bungalow court, cottage court feel that you would normally, a traditional feel that you would normally encounter with one of these, as opposed to just more houses stacked behind them. But in terms of the front-loaded garages that I mentioned before, we also have added a standard in there for front-loaded garages and very consciously measured many of the front-loaded garages that are in the area. There actually aren't that many in the N2. They're almost all in the N1. But just to make sure that that standard was set to be approximately 1/3 of the front facade, so that the image that you see in the bottom left-hand corner, where it's approximately 60% of the facade, wouldn't be able to happen. Okay, so that's building types, which I know is a lot of information. Just know that building types work with uses. We've used all of your existing use definitions. We have created a single table format and then keyed how those uses are allowed within each one of the districts, whether it's just a permitted use, has standards associated with it, is only allowed in the upper stories, or is limited in the footprint. But it's just important to note that a building type has to be used and then the uses are allowed within the building type. So in a lot of cases, the building form will help uses work within the area. And then, as I said, there's a whole series of building design standards about windows and window depth, balconies, the sort of typical design guidelines that you would normally have. I'm showing you here the street facade materials, just to say that I typically separate them into major materials and minor materials. So 65 or 2/3 of the facade needs to be covered in a major material. It's a smaller list than what is allowed in the minor materials. And that just helps to make sure that we're managing those materials for durability and high quality buildings. And they are managed also by building type. So the building types that are more sort of the siding, like in the multi-unit house or the yard house, they aren't required to be brick, as much brick or masonry as in the other building types. So it's managed by building type as well. And then we've also incorporated landscape standards and buffers. Most notably, we have a frontage buffer for parking lots, which is what you see on the right-hand side of the page, so that any parking that is along a street has a standard for landscape along it to be buffered from the sidewalk. And then parking, we have sort of pulled from the College Hill neighborhood overlay we've used the same standard in the N1 and the R1 and the R2 that the College Hill overlay included for owner-occupied and renter-occupied detached and attached single unit and 2-unit buildings. But for multi-unit buildings, we've pulled the standard from the downtown, which is 0.75 per bedroom, but not less than 1 per unit. That standard works pretty well because we believe that there's approximately 75% ownership of cars in the college student population. We also have seen this number work well in other locations, but we still believe that there should be some credits allowed for those developments because they're pretty small lots, and the city actually has quite a few public parking lots in the area. And so what we have proposed is a series of credits for things like motorcycle and scooter parking, shared use parking. If a building were to have a share car, that they could get some credit for parking spaces. But we've also allowed for a payment of fee, or we're proposing to allow for a payment of fee in lieu of up to 35% of the required parking spaces. And the idea is that this fee in lieu, so they would still need to provide the majority of the parking, 2/3 of the parking that we're requiring, but that 1/3 of it could go for purchase and development of more common parking lot areas, which would help both the businesses in the area, but also help residents to have parking associated with their different sites. So parking would always be required to be on site. Somebody couldn't purchase their own lot. Okay, I'm losing my voice now, which means I need to stop talking. But the idea is that, you know, we're creating this sort of fund to build more of those public parking lots. Okay, and so finally, just in terms of approval processes, you know, one of our goals is to define clear objective standards that will help with consistent interpretation and predictability. That means that if you do what is in the code, that it's easier, a more streamlined approach to get your development approved by using an administrative site plan process. We also are planning to fold in relief and flexibility using the two sort of tools that are in your downtown code. The proportionate compliance for existing buildings, which allows you to sort of negotiate some of the elements that might be hard to meet if you're doing expansions or reusing a building. And then a minor adjustment process for small relief of objective regulations. So there are, when we know that there's going to need to be relief for some of the very objective regulations, we've actually folded in some minor adjustments in there that you can ask staff for. So you may have heard me mention the downtown character districts, and I will say that we've used those as sort of a basis for development of this code, but there are some notable differences. One is that instead of using the sort of frontage types and mapping the frontage types, we've actually defined zoning districts. We're using building types instead of frontage types. I have just found that people know what a storefront building is. They don't really understand what the word frontage means, but that's the way that we've chosen to move forward with this. We have prioritized primary street frontages, so College Street is a primary street frontage, side streets are not, and so we're more flexible on the side streets. We've created this use table, and we've really avoided any kind of non-objective, non-regulatory language. The character districts has a lot of intent language, and we have tried to fold that into objective language as much as possible. But otherwise, they are very similar, and we have tried to use a lot of the vocabulary carried forward. So that's all that I can say at this point. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Knowing that this is the initial presentation, there'll be lots of time. There's the conversation outside in the foyer after this. I'm assuming there's the process for right now. There's no need for...
Yeah, so our plan is to have an open house so people can, a lot of these images from Leslie's presentation are on the boards out here in the foyer, and so people can stay, can visit with us. The staff will be out there, Leslie will be out there to answer any questions, initial questions, but we want to give people time to sort of absorb all this. So the actual code will be posted on the project webpage in the next couple days, at the latest by Friday, so that people can actually dive into the code language if they would like to. And Leslie's presentation will also be the link to it. If people didn't get a chance to come and hear the presentation, you can hear parts of it or on our YouTube link. And then at the next Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, our plan was to have the formal meeting and then move into a work session that would be less formal, and we'll probably move into meeting room 2 after the formal meeting, so that you folks have had a couple weeks to sort of, any questions that you have, work through any questions, initial questions that you have an opportunity to do that in a more informal setting rather than here and on TV. It's still a public meeting, so people are welcome to come, but that would be just a work session for the commission to ask questions. For the public itself, there'll be a number of opportunities, and this open house tonight, and then in a couple weeks another open house, and I know that I see a lot of faces out here that we've invited to some stakeholder meetings coming up as well. So
That's very good. Thank you very much for the presentation. And that does end the official business on the Planning and Zoning meeting. So are there any commission updates?
I don't have anything for you tonight.
Okay. Then I think we would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All right. Look forward to seeing people out for the presentation and the conversation outside. Thank you.